Alright guys, we're back in my garage, and this week on the B58 Digest, we have two topics we're going to talk about, so let's go ahead and hop right into it. So earlier this year, we talked about all of the Supras getting a little bit faster as we get towards the fall. Just as conditions improve and things like that, we're going to see a lot of these cars getting a lot faster. And last week we talked about the overall record being broken, and now we have a new record on the stock engine. So this car that we're looking at ran an 8.9 at 152 miles an hour. So that makes it the fastest stock engine B58 out there, as well as the first stock engine car to get into the 8s. So an incredibly impressive time. Obviously the car is flying, and a lot of people are asking how is this even possible. So I think if we kind of look at the timeline, it'll paint the picture of what we're actually looking at. So the first time that we heard about this car was back in June, and it's tuned by Mike Body, and so he posted on his page that it hit the highest horsepower numbers they had seen from a stock engine. And they posted up the dyno here. You can see it hit 815 wheel horsepower, but a lot of excuses were kind of being made. Everybody saw it and knew it was impressive, but it just barely touched 815, around 6,500 RPM. And overall, people were kind of just waiting to see what the actual performance numbers would look like. But still, hitting that number on the dyno was impressive. We were just kind of waiting to see if it also set impressive times. Then about a month later, he posted up some initial numbers where it hit a 9.9 at the quarter mile strip. And I think a lot of people said, that's kind of what they expected. It hit big numbers on the dyno, but maybe wasn't flying down the track. And just overall, it didn't make a whole lot of noise. It's still impressive, and maybe we're getting a little bit jaded now that we have so many 9-second Supras out there. But the real telltale sign was the trap speed, and hitting 147 miles an hour shows that the power was there. The car was fast. It just maybe needed more work to get everything to hook up. So, like I said, there was a little bit of speculation. So they went back and did even more dialing in, more testing to get everything set up. So they made another post in September showing that they were doing some 8th mile testing, and it was running 5.7s, which are incredibly quick. And it had also dialed the 60-foot time down to a 1.3. So the suspension was working, the tires were working, everything was working on that car. But it still needed to get to a quarter mile strip to actually see how fast it would run. And then finally last night, they posted up some new numbers, and you can see that it hit over 860 wheel horsepower. So they turned it up a little bit more, made about 50 horsepower more. But the real gains were seen across the power band, and you can see just how wide the power band is now. Instead of just barely touching 815 wheel horsepower, it's making 860 wheel horsepower across, 1500 to 2000 RPM. So now, even though it might not have a significant improvement in the peak horsepower, there's going to be a significant improvement in the performance just because of, the area under the curve. So after he posted that up, it looks like they went back to the strip and they ran a 9.2 and then a 9.1, and then they finally closed out the night with the 8.9. So big congratulations to them. I think it was obviously a lot of work to get that done, but they did it. Now, if you're like me, you're probably already trying to come up with some excuses for how this all came together. And the first thing, everybody assumed they were running nitrous, but they did confirm that this was only on boost. Then you're probably thinking, they took a lot of weight out of the car. Maybe it just has a driver's seat or a lightweight racing seat. But then they posted that it's completely full weight and a 260-pound driver. So, that's one of my biggest excuses personally, being full weight and being a bigger guy. It does make it a lot harder to get really good performance out of the car. But despite all of that, they were still able to get into the 8s. Now, after doing a little bit of digging, I was able to confirm the setup. So he has a custom-made turbo kit with a Precision 6466, so a good-sized turbo. It also has port injection with reflex controller for the flex fuel and all of their port injection controller needs. And then it has a pure drivetrain stage 1 transmission to help hold the power. So relatively simple, or you could say like minimal mods, a transmission, port injection, and a turbo kit, but a lot of work from the team to make all of that come together and actually hit those times. And apparently this is exactly what he asked for. He wanted an 8-second street car with minimal compromises, and they made it happen. Now, one other thing to consider is that this is a 2021 Supra, so it has the 6-port head with the low compression engine that might tend to making it hold this horsepower level a lot better. And like I said, they've been making in the 800s since June, so we've seen a lot of 2-port Supras and even Gen 1 B58s break at this power level. So we're going to maybe get a little more information on how much power these cars can hold. And once more of the ECUs are able to be unlocked, we might really see a lot of these cars flying, even with a completely stock engine. But it is fortunate that he has the newer car with the newer engine and still being able to tune it by having a DME before the cutoff date. So they're getting a lot of testing in, and this is just preparing them for the future when everybody else can get the same kind of performance. So yeah, really impressive times. This is his Instagram if you guys want to check it out. He doesn't really seem to post his Supra on there, but maybe that'll change in the future now that it's really cranking out some numbers. But congratulations, Matt, and congratulations, Body, for putting this car together. And I look forward to seeing if you guys continue turning it up in the future. Oh, and one other interesting thing, Body posted right after that they had another Supra on the dyno, no mods listed, but it also hit 840 wheel horsepower. So we'll see. Maybe these cars will really start cranking out high horsepower figures with the stock engine once more of them are able to be tuned. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is a new PCV solution, and this one is from Vargas, and they do have a pretty unique implementation for how they, put this together. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about it, show you guys how it works, and then I'll kind of give my initial thoughts. So what you see here is kind of like a maintenance-free solution, and you have the cap itself that replaces the plastic one. You're going to remove the diaphragm from inside, and it has holes in the cap that go up through that banjo fitting and reroute your gases back to, the check valve for your evap system. So it's kind of an interesting style of implementation, and I do like that it's maintenance-free. You don't have to worry about oil vapor in the engine bay. You don't have to worry about draining a catch can or anything like that. It basically just deletes that diaphragm that can fail and recirculates the gases back into, your intake tract. Now, they said that the goal for this was to maintain vacuum on the PCV system because that's how the OEM implementation works. And that's how, the diaphragm kind of functions depending on whether it's in boost or not in boost. It can direct the gases, to the correct path. So this kind of maintains that vacuum source to pull crankcase gases out and should make the system more efficient. So all of those are good things, and I think especially the price combined with it being maintenance free will make a lot of people want to go with this kind of solution. There are a lot of different ways to make this work, and this isn't necessarily optimized from a performance benefit. For one, it doesn't actually block off the head ports, and that's something that's really nice because completely deleting the PCV lets you take control of where those PCV gases go. Having a vacuum on the PCV system is extremely efficient, but to pull a vacuum through the engine means that you're going to be pulling those crankcase gases back through the engine, and that's going to include oil vapor. So if you're in a case where you want to just maximize the performance of your car and completely separate the oil vapor from your intake, or if you're pushing a lot of oil, maybe you have a built engine or running really high boost, so you just need a separate catch can to pull that oil out of the system, this isn't going to solve that problem for you. What you really want is a system that, allows you to completely delete the PCV kit, vent that gas to atmosphere, and if you need to vent more crankcase gases and it's not pulling out enough, then run a bigger filter, add additional ports, do whatever you need to do to allow that excess crankcase pressure to escape. Now personally, I talked about the Ross Racing PCV solution in a previous video. That's the one that I have as well. My car already has a vent to atmosphere aspect to it because of my turbo kit, and I know a lot of people are choosing to go that route just because it doesn't bother them as much. So really it's going to be kind of up to you. So I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment in the product description that's indicating, that removing the vacuum from the PCV system will be worse for it, or that, putting them into a catch can is going to cause something to fail or anything like that. For me, in all of my testing, I haven't had any issues, and everybody else that I know using those types of systems are not having any issues. So it's really just up to you to decide what's most important. Do you want the kit that kind of lends to better performance and separating the oil from your intake tract, or one that's maintenance free and still works really well? Because in the grand scheme of things, for most setups, you're not going to be getting a lot of blow by. You're not going to get a lot of oil vapor recirculating. It's just kind of up to you on what's most important and how much you want to spend. Also considering the fact that, their valve cover deletes the PCV system. It tries to pull the vacuum the same way, but it doesn't necessarily need that part for the valve cover to work. Now, as far as recommendations are concerned, we're going to have to see more of them come out into the field. I just want to make sure before I recommend it to anybody that it has good fitment and it functions as expected and things like that. A lot of these things can have great ideas behind the design and development, but it's really critical to, focus on the actual execution. So I'm sure a lot of people will be buying them if they haven't bought them already, and we'll start getting some reviews in the future. So just keep an eye out on that if this is a kit that you're interested in. So that's all we have for this week. Thanks again to everybody for watching, and I hope this video helps give you a little bit more insight on the things that are going on in the B58 world. And if you have any other questions or comments or any other ideas for what you want me to talk about in a future video, leave them down below.